Hi, I'm Sara Collins, and I'm the author of The Confessions of Franny Langton, which is about Franny Langton, who is a young Jamaican woman who is brought to London in the early 19th century, and she's given as a gift to a famous natural philosopher, George Benham. And she's then accused of murdering him and his wife, with whom she's been having a very twisted love affair. So I'm here in Waterstones, Piccadilly, and I'm here to tell you about 3 books that inspired me as a writer. And you've got to start in the classic section. So I'm starting with a classic, which is Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. I absolutely love this book, and I discovered it during my teenage love affair with Gothic novels. I think it's one of the best of the Gothics. It's like the original dark and stormy tale, both in its conception and its setting, but also I think in its effects, because it's been the originator of so many stories like this, including the novel that I wrote. And everyone knows the story. And what I love about it is that it's the most amazingly powerful tale of loneliness and longing. And I was rereading this while writing my own novel, trying to imbue a sense of that kind of emotion into my own language. And what interested me when I did that was the focus on the man being visited by the terrible consequences of his own awful experiments. And that was really useful to me because I was writing about the roots of scientific racism and kind of considering the limits of scientific inquiry and that perpetual question where science and ethics meet, about not how far can we go, but how far should we go. And I don't think there's been a better illumination of that question in fiction than this novel. It's absolutely classic, one that I would press upon anyone who hasn't delved into this classic to explore, and definitely one that shaped my own novel. And so my second choice, and one of my favorite writers, is James Baldwin. This is his novel Giovanni's Room. James Baldwin, in my opinion, did more than almost any writer to throw the door open widely and forcefully for Black writers. And I've long been a fan of his essays. I think he writes with an elegance and a clarity that any writer should try to emulate. But I had avoided his novels for some reason until I stumbled across Giovanni's Room. So this is the story of David, who's an American in Paris, who falls in love with Giovanni, who is a young Italian waiter. And it's a tragic love story, but the tragedy bookends this brief but perfect interlude that the pair of them spend in Giovanni's room. And it's a story about, not only about love, but also about overcoming self-hatred. And I absolutely love the quality of the prose and the intensity of the love story. And I also love the story behind the publication of this book, because Baldwin's publisher warned him against releasing it. He said it would ruin his career because the homosexual aspects of the story would alienate his Black readership. And he went ahead and did it anyway, and I think it reminds us that writers should have courage. And so last but definitely not least for me is the great Toni Morrison, and my favorite of hers, which is Beloved. I think this is the most beautifully written of ghost stories, and it starts with one of the most beautiful opening lines, which is 124 was spiteful, full of a baby's venom. And like all of her sentences, it really pulls you right into its orbit, which in this case is a story of a mother who is haunted by the ghost of the baby she killed rather than see her taken back to slavery. I read this also when I was a teenager, and it really shook me up like nothing ever had before or ever had since. I think this book has stayed in my DNA. And the first thing it did for me that was so profound was it made me feel proud. Toni Morrison was the first author about whom I could say in response, that could have been me or that could be me. And although I don't think you need permission to write, or it's a shame if you do need permission to write, Toni Morrison really did give me permission to think that I could do it too. But also because when I was writing my own novel, I was struggling with the idea of writing about an enslaved person. I really didn't want to do it. And looking at this book now from that perspective, I think what she did was show us why it's important to do that, why we can't forget slavery, but also why we shouldn't forget it, and why it's important to grapple with the after effects of it. And she did that, I think, better than anyone has ever done it, or probably ever can do it. And what she did was illuminate and reclaim and reveal the emotional lives of enslaved people by really powerful acts of imagination, which go to prove for me, I think, especially as someone who's engaged in writing historical fiction, how much more important and true and meaningful imagination can be, even than history itself.